So, shalom and welcome everyone. My name is Elisa DeFalco, and thank you for joining myself and my brother Tony to share in this special holiday. We know that we're coming upon the High Holy Days, and we have a very special story we'd like to share with you. It's one that Tony and I, when we talk about it, it makes you laugh, it makes you cry, and it makes you think. And it begins with my brother being an artist in the Tampa area of Florida. This is a real story with a really wonderful ending to it. And I think it's something that a lot of people are going to relate to, especially at this time of the year. And when you're reaching out and trying to help people that are in trouble or in need, sometimes we get intimidated. But I know once you hear my brother's story, and we felt many times that we should record this, and this is raw, okay? So there might be some flaws, but they're the flaws of man, so forgive us if we do. But we really want to get this story out to you because it's really a God story. So I'm going to bring up Tony and let him start with his whole story. And Tony, I'm bringing up a picture of your artwork too, because he worked so hard that you'll see from the picture here what type of artwork he actually does. Some of you who've been to Tampa may have recognized this artwork. So Tony, tell them how this whole story begins. You're an artist and you wind up in a job that you weren't expecting to be in. What happened?
Okay, let's go back to the early 2000s, and basically, I worked in the Clearwater area, Clearwater Beach, Tampa, St. Pete, and honestly, working and doing artistry, it's difficult. It's hard to Sometimes it's hard to make it. You don't always have a lot of jobs. So this was around about just before this happened, around 2004, 5. I used to like to read Revelations, and I had an interest in it, and I seen that, God wanted us to help Israel. So I found Wings of Eagles. I think a lot of people know who they are now. They've been around for a while, but at the time, I don't think they were known as much. And so I started sending money to Wings of Eagles to help people go back to Israel. And I started doing that around 2005, 2006. And what it does is you pay, and you can basically help one person go back to Israel, a Jewish person from different countries. I happen to be helping the Russians, and I helped other countries, but I kind of focused on sending Russian Jews back to Israel. Well, as time went on, a couple, 2 or 3 years later, I was doing this, when I had enough money to save up to send someone. So I got to a point there where I had a lull in work. I wasn't doing a lot. So I needed to look up a part-time job, and I'll just tell you this is what's kind of funny about it. I normally would just do side work for people, but for some reason I decided to look in the paper, and I never really ever do that. And I was thinking about, well, what kind of job would I like to get that's part-time out of the paper? Well, almost instantaneously, I look in there, and right in there was a job for a part-time limo driver. Well, years ago, I drove a truck, so, I had a good driving record. So I said, I'm going to check this out, And the person who had put the ad out, we're just going to call him Boss. He was in St. Pete. And so that was about 30 minutes from me, from where I was living. So I call the ad, and the gentleman answers, and he tells me where he lives in St. Pete, basically on the intercoastal St. Pete Beach. So I answered the ad. I headed down there, And I don't know if it's all right, but I'm going to use his accent a little bit because I kind of liked it, you know. And so I actually had a little hard time finding him because he didn't give me, you know, really like good directions. So right off the bat on the phone, he was getting a little aggravated with me. He's like, "You can't even find my house. You want to drive for me?" That's what he said to me. I said, "Just give me a little better direction." So ultimately, what he said to me was, "When you get here, don't you come on my property. You stay out in the street." He actually told me that.
Don't
So
come to the property, stand out in the street to do
yeah,
your job interview.
he told me to stand out in the street. So anyways, I ultimately get there and I call him. I'm standing in the street and this guy comes out of the house. He's about 6 foot tall, got a very nice, clean haircut, very professional looking, you know, in his probably his late 30s. You know, at the time I didn't know how old he was, late 30s, early 40s, very clean cut. So he walks up to me, and as he's walking at me, he isn't making any expressions. He's staring me right in the eye, and he walks right up to me where he's about a foot away. And then he looks at my eyes, and then he looks down very slowly all the way to my feet, and then slowly looks up back at me, and right in my eyes, he goes, "Do you always look like this?" So right off the bat, I was like, man, this guy, in my mind, I'm like, this guy's something else, you know? So I kind of, normally I don't, I get a good sense of humor. Usually don't get aggravated, but I just, because of the way he did it, I said, look, you know what? I said, you asked for a limo driver. I got an excellent driving record. I have no tickets or anything. So if you're looking for a good driver, I'm sure I'll be the guy you would like. So he says to me, he goes, well, I've had 6 people here today, and I didn't like any of them. Says, but I will give you a try. Come back in 2 hours, and we will try you tonight. So that's how it started, me and this guy. And we're just gonna, like I said, call him boss. And anyways, I ultimately went back, and in the beginning, he was very, because we're not gonna make this thing too long, because there's a lot. Let me just say this: his personality could actually make a movie the way he is, just the way he is. He's such a character. But at first, I didn't really care for him. He was challenging me on all kinds of things that weren't even really happening. You know, like after I would drive the limo at night, you know, I'd have to clean it out and do all that, you know, to make it right for the next time. Oh, and by the way, this was his limo. He had his own limo and several sports cars, and he was worth a lot of money. He lived, I'll just say this, he lived on the intercoastal. He had a yacht. He had a huge home. And, you know, from what I understood, I learned later he was worth about 30 million. So he was a pretty young guy worth a lot of money. And
He was living the life too, and it really is. Over those couple of years you worked with him in a job that you never thought you'd be doing, and just seeing his whole lifestyle, it really is. It's the thing that movies are made of. It's what people go and pay money for to watch. And here you were actually living in his world, which was isolated from really like the rest of the population. It's kind of strange, but it's interesting how your testimony comes in here to reach a man that nobody could reach or touch or wanted to because they were too afraid to. And
well, that's a good point. And I wasn't thinking about reaching him at all. I was just thinking about working and making money on the side. And so, anyways, I'll just quickly tell you that he was very particular, and sometimes I think he's seen stuff that wasn't there. And one day he told me there was something laying in the back that I clean. Believe me, one thing I am is clean. You know our mom. I mean, I was clean. I'm clean. And I had that limo clean. There wasn't nothing there. And he said he seen something. And I looked all around the back and I'm like, what did he see? You know? But anyways, for the first couple months, he was he basically what he told me, like, here's the thing, just so you know what we did. Basically, we went, you know, and I, you know, what we did was we went to almost every club and every topless bar within 100 miles of St. Pete. I mean, he knew where they all were. He was known at all of them. And basically, I would pick him up. I would be at his house at around 10 at night. And sometimes he would have people with him. Sometimes he'd be alone. And he would tell me where to go. And he would shut the window in the back. And we had a GPS at the time. And he was very adamant about the GPS. He didn't want me to go, even if I knew where it was. He always demanded that he would say, Tony, you must read the GPS. And I would go, boss, but I know where it is. He goes, I want you to use the GPS. So, you know, that's how he was. And he had told me after I was there a couple of weeks, he said to me, he goes, I just want you to know one thing. You are the chauffeur, and that's all you need to know. That's how I used to talk, you know. And, you know, actually, that's what I was. But, you know, it was basically letting me know that that's my business. Don't say anything to him, which I knew, you know, not to. And another thing I learned about him over a short period of time is he had other chauffeurs work for him and he fired them. And I surmised after I was there for a little while that he had a lot of beautiful women from these clubs. And he used to have girls flown in from other you know, like from New York and other states. We would pick them up at the airport, these high, what do you call them, high class, you know,
And
escorts. I mean, these were beautiful women. And I realized at one point that I said, you know, I bet you they were looking at these girls a little too much. And I bet you he didn't like that. So I realized right off the bat, I never really stared or looked at any of his girls any longer than I had to get them in the vehicle or get their luggage or whatever. So I was very professional, and I did not, you know, do anything to make him think, you know, I was, you know, going past my boundary as a chauffeur.
which ultimately led him to trusting you in a way that he didn't any of his employees, that he never let close to him. So you earned his
He was very he definitely made sure I knew what my business was there, and we had many rules, and he loved Russian. He got his vodka from Russia, and a lot of his things from Russia, and I'd have to stock the limo with all these products that he you know, came from the homeland. So, and I'll tell you a little later about what happened after about 4 or 5 months where it became like a routine. I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. And I started to notice, I felt that he started to like me a little bit. He started to act a little more nice to me, you know, and like sometimes I could hear them in the back, and there was this one guy that he would pick up all the time. I never really liked him. The guy kind of insulted me on a regular basis, you know, nicely but gently. Like one time I heard him say to the boss, which I'm not going to use his name, he said, you know, your limo driver, we can get there faster in a bus. You know, so, but I heard my boss tell him, don't worry, I like the way he drives, you know. And he wanted me to drive very slow. He was out for the night. So anyways, we'll get into some of the things we did. So we're going to all these clubs. Well, when you go to those clubs, believe me, stuff happens. There's no way avoiding it. With all the girls that he had around, you know, And these girls all knew that he was wealthy, and they would chase him. I mean, I remember one night we were coming home, and he told the girl to follow us back to his house, and she was in her car, and we went through the light, and the light turned red as after I got through, so she got stopped, and so I started to slow down, and he goes, "What are you doing? Keep going." I said, "Well, she's stuck at the light." He goes, "Oh, don't worry, she'll find us." So he never really was worried about these girls, and the girls, man, they really, wanted him. So, and one time, well, I'm gonna just tell you a few things, but there's so many things that he did. But there was a couple of things. Like this one time we were in Sarasota, and he told me to go get this girl. He was at the club. He said, "Go get her. She's in Bradenton. Go pick her up and bring her back." So I go to pick this girl up, and I get there. She gets in the back of the limo. She opens all the windows. She turns the stereo up full blast. And we're driving back to the club, and she opens up the window between, me and them in the back, and she starts reaching through and rubbing me on the chest and saying, she goes, "I'm going to dance for you when I get to the club. You're going to come in." And I'm like, oh my God, that's the last thing I need to have happen. He's going to fire me. I would get fired even if she says anything. So anyways, we get back to the club, and I was worried. So I text him to come out and talk to me, because he goes, what do you need? And I said, "I just want you to know that girl in there, I just want you to know nothing ever happened, but she was reaching through the window, and it sounds funny, but I didn't want her, to say something and, make me look bad." So I told him what she did, and he looked at me, he goes, "Did you tell her you were a professional?" And I laughed. I said, "Boss, I didn't think of that." He goes, "From now on, if these girls even touch you, you can stop the limo right there and tell them to get out." So anyways, at that point, I knew, I was okay with him, but let's move on a little forward. There's a whole bunch of that stuff that went on, just different things from going to those clubs that one story after another, because he was a playboy, basically. What else would he be? He had
What a character. The stories, the times I would call you and you would be in the limo, and the things I would hear that were happening in the background. Like I said, that just played out like a movie, from women chasing the vehicle running in their high heels, to him getting thrown out of the bar backwards, to him asking crazy questions. But ultimately, we know that whole lifestyle caught up with him. And it just didn't matter how much money he had or how many people he had around him. There was that point.
Well, here's the thing. He had a lot of people around him, but I know now, after the time I spent with him, that he didn't trust any of them, and he didn't respect. I don't want to say he was mean or inconsiderate to them, but he did not respect any of them. He knew the deal. But anyways, he had a place in Miami and a place in Tampa, and well, anyways, let's get past all that. Let's just get to the point kind of where, okay, so all these kind of different things were happening, and there's many of them that are funny as heck. Let me just tell you this. Anytime we went to a club or, like a dance bar, topless bar, he'd always want me to be really close to the front door. So I would have to sit, as close as I could to the front door. So when he texted me, was basically, he said within 6 seconds, he's going to be at that door, and he wants to just come out of the building and be in the limo immediately. So I used to have to always jockey around. Sometimes those bouncers and that around there didn't want me doing that. I'd have to, mess around trying to be close to the door all the time. And there's all kinds of stuff that came up with that, just You know, he wanted me a getaway one time. I had to race down Central Avenue in St. Pete, which I am not a, you know, that's not what I'm about. But he was saying, get going, man, turn it, you know, basically saying, go fast. I pay all tickets. That's what he was saying to me. I don't even know what happened that night. I just know somebody was after him. So, but I guess the point I'm going to get to is I think I would say after about 6 or 7 months, he started to actually open the separation between him and I, and he would talk to me. One night he just started talking to me. It was kind of floored me because he was up to that point. He had no communicado with me necessarily other than to tell me what to do, you know? And so that night he started telling me, I could see he didn't feel good. And he started telling me a little bit about himself. And I knew his accent. He was, from like Russia or somewhere, but I didn't know any more than that. So I told him, I said, I help some Russian people sometimes. And he goes, well, he asked me what I meant. I said, well, I help Russian Jews go back to Israel when I can. I've been doing it with this Wings of Eagles. So anyways, he gets quiet. And then he says to me, he goes, well, that's how I left and I got to America. Now, he never told me it was Wings of Eagles. I just assumed somebody helped him get out of Russia, went to Israel, then he went to New York, he said. So somebody helped him. So anyways, within a few days, I got a call from the secretary. And he has a lot of people under him, and he has a lot of properties and buildings and industries. And she called me and she goes to me, Tony, what did you do to him? What'd you do to the boss? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, he wants you to get a full week's pay every week, and you only work 2 or 3 nights a week. He goes, he never does this. And from now on, you get a full week's pay. So I started getting a full week's check, even though I worked only 2 or 3 nights a week for him. So I guess the moral of that little story is here I gave to Wings of Eagles, and basically it wasn't long before all that I gave to Wings of Eagles, I ended up getting back. You see what I'm saying? So that was...
You gave, and not only that, it brings his soul, because he related to that he was actually a recipient of that generosity through Wings of Eagles. That was how he got out of Russia, and then eventually ultimately comes to America and lives the American dream, which then later on starts to turn into a nightmare because he's becoming very, very sick from this lifestyle of excess. So
yeah, I don't really know what happened to him. I know his liver was bad. I don't know exactly what happened. I did see some papers one day by accident, and I kind of have things I could say about it, but I'm not, because I can't answer it and know it for sure. But he was living the wild lifestyle. And anyways, I want to tell a few more things about him. So anyways, he didn't get, he started to be friendly to me, but he still was a little bit hard on me. And there'd be days that he was a kind of person, he's a Russian Jewish person, and he's all about business, no playing around, no humor, not too much humor. This is how it is. So even though he started being, he basically gave me a gift there. He hadn't changed, but he was communicating with me more. So we had a point there where we had kind of a run-in in the middle of this, if I can remember correctly. He was always kind of hard on me sometimes, where I started to get, I'll give you an example. We were leaving Tampa, we were going inland. And there's a way to get across there faster. And there was a bar, a topless bar he liked to go to over there. Well, the GPS was telling me to get on the crosstown, and I knew if I got on the crosstown, I would end up passing this place I needed to go to. And I knew it would have been easier not to go that way. So I said to him, I said, boss, I said, the GPS isn't accurate. And at that time, the GPSs weren't that accurate. Sometimes they would send you off out of the way. So I told him that, and he goes, you use the GPS and you go where it tells you to go. So we end up getting on the highway, and ultimately we're passing where he wants to go. And I could see him in the mirror. I could see he's seen where, because we could see from the highway where he wanted to go. And he's like, where do we get off? I said, well, we got to go another couple of miles to get off at 301 so we can go back. And he got really silent, you know. And then all of a sudden, he just freaked out and he started yelling, I did not come out to ride in the back of my limousine. I can't even get to where I want to go. He's yelling. And he sticks his head through the opening. Now his head is basically sitting on my shoulder. His face is on my face. He goes, do I have to stay up here and tell you exactly where to go? Well, you know, here's the thing. He's the one that told me to use the GPS. I told him it was out of the way, but somehow miraculously he forgot that that was his fault. So that night, oh, and by the way, I haven't told you guys this. Every night after the clubs, you know, we'd get out of there maybe 3 o'clock, you know, late, because the clubs are open late in Tampa. We would go to Hard Rock, and he would gamble there till around, you know, at least a couple hours, and then we would come home 5 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. Another thing is we'd have all those guys at the time, they used to race their bikes across there, the Howard Franklin, in the middle of the night. So we'd have these bikes going by us 130, 140, 50 miles an hour. It used to freak me out. You know, I was more worried about driving home at night than anything he did. So, but anyways, we'd end up going to Hard Rock. And that night, he had me so mad. I was like, man, in my mind, I was like, I had enough of this guy, you know. And so I was thinking about when I dropped him off at Hard Rock, I was waiting out there. I said, you know, I'm just going to park the limo and take a taxi home. And something in my mind, it came to me, it said, something just said, you need to stay here for him. Just have patience. Stay here for him. So anyways, I ended up staying there. And so as time went on, we had a lot of events, but he ultimately invited me into his house, which he would never do. And he showed me all of his stuff. I mean, he had a beautiful home. He really got to where he trusted me. He showed me, walked me around, showed me his house, showed me all his cars, you know, and I don't remember. He had all red sports cars, like a red Maserati, a red a Ferrari with a glass hood on it. He had them all in this, under his house, he had a big garage. And here's what's funny about it. He's showing me all these expensive sports cars. And he goes to me, he goes, Tony, I have one thing I really like, and I want to show it to you. So he takes me down like a little walk area, and there's a room. It's not as big as of a garage, but it's got a nice sort of size door, but you know it couldn't be a car. And I was thinking, well, what you got in there? A motorcycle or something. So he opens the door. This is honest to God truth. This is what I said. I said, it was red, and I go, that's a moped. I said that to him. Well, of course, it probably wasn't a moped, but it looked like a red moped. And he goes, Tony, but it goes 90 miles an hour. And I said, you have a moped that goes 90 miles an hour, you better have a helmet, boss. But he loved that moped. I mean, I don't know if it was a moped. I call it a moped, but it looked like a moped. But he would bring that thing out at night, and sometimes it wouldn't start. And he had this penthouse in Tampa in this gated, like, huge condo complex where he had a guard. And we'd come back at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he'd want me to push him around in this parking lot underneath the building while the guard would watch us while I'm pushing him around on the moped so he could, make it pop the clutch and make it start. But he loved that moped, that red little motorcycle bike or whatever it was. He thought that was the greatest thing, which kind of surprised me. I started to realize, he's like a big kid. So
Exactly. He's an adult child, can have anything he wants. He wants to play with the moped rather than all the toys that he has. But ultimately, it's going to bring you back to him because all his money and all the people still couldn't fill the hole. I want you to tell them, Tony, what happened to you that one night, because you did. I remember when you told me, I want to quit this job. I've had it with him because, and I laugh in my mind because I know you being a former hockey player and you're tough and you've met your match. He's equally as tough. And if you've ever had to put two people together and try to talk about God in this situation, it's amazing to me that it all worked out, but that's how God is. He uses the person who's willing to try, and you were willing to stay for him, not knowing. You just kept telling me, I'm here for something. I'm here for something. And then it goes to that night, just a few years ago, right around this time of the year.
All right, well, we're going to skip a lot of stuff, and we'll get to that. Now, another thing is, I am a born-again Christian, but, I'm not one that goes around, with all honesty, I'm not really someone that, I support people to be Christians, and I help people, but I'm not really good at bringing them over, like, and giving them, telling them, how to be a Christian, basically, by giving your life to Christ. I've never really done that, You know what I'm saying? In other words,
the training courses, you weren't out on the corner passing out the tracts and the brochures. You're just there working with this man that got put in your life. But he used that. He used that.
Well, anyways, here's the thing. He was sick. I knew he was sick. I knew there was something wrong. He wasn't doing well. And he called me one night. It was later in the evening. And he called me and asked him to take him to the hospital. So I had to drive down there and then drive him back out to Clearwater. That was a little better an hour or so drive. And I'm thinking to myself, and by this point, well, this is probably about a year and a little better than a year later. Now we know each other pretty good. I can talk to him and he talks, we have a little bit of a friendship going on. So anyways, I take him to the hospital, and every time he went, he'd always give the doctors a hard time. So I dropped him off there. I was waiting for him outside. He was only in there probably about 30 minutes or so, and I could see he was really sick. Ultimately, his liver was gone. You could see it in the skin. He was not doing good. And I kind of seen it coming already. Like I said, I seen some paperwork and stuff. So I already knew he was not in good shape. And so he gets out. He leaves there. He goes, I had enough with these doctors. I'm going, whatever happened in there, they didn't do it the way he wanted to do. And so I said to myself, this is a time to try to tell him about, God, Christ, and all that. I said, and I'm thinking to myself, I go, Tony, you really think you're the one to say this? Should you really even, is he going to even listen to me? So he gets in the vehicle, he's down, he's telling me he's not doing well. And I said to him, I said, Steve, you know what? If you're not doing really good, you really should start thinking about what's going on in your life. And if anything happened, what would happen, where you would go. And I said, and he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you gotta like figure out, what's going to happen if you die. And I'm just, do you believe in Jesus? And the first thing he said to me was, this is what was kind of strange. He goes, who is this Jesus? That's what he said to me. I was like, whoa, in my mind. I thought that was pretty deep.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I said, well, Jesus came and died on the cross for us for our sins so we can go to heaven. And that's for all people. And I said, all you have to do is say, I want Jesus in my heart, like that. I said that to him. And the first thing he said to me was, you want Jesus in your heart. He says that to me. I go, no. And I said, no, it's for you. You have to say it for yourself. So ultimately he said it. Now, we talked a little bit, but that night I drove him home and I thought to myself, I said, did he really, even like when you do it yourself, you go, did it really work? You know what I'm saying?
Did it really happen? Did it stick?
Did it really happen? And this is what happened. Only one other time the secretary called me when he gave me the money. Remember the weekly pay?
Yeah.
She called me that next morning again. And she goes, what did you do to the boss? She says. I go, what are you talking about? She goes, all he's talking about is seeing churches and talking about Jesus. She told me that. And I was like, wow. So ultimately, he started to become a believer in Christ. And I did not really minister to him, really. I mean, I talked a little about it, but still I'm working and I'm still doing what he's asking, but now he's changing. But ultimately, about a month or so later, I ended up getting another job and I left. I had to go to actually get a really, really good paying job, and I ended up doing that. So we still talked every once in a while. And then a couple of years later, he called me and asked me to come back. Well, I was working in the film industry at that time. And I told him, I said, boss, I really can't come back. I'm really being paid well. And it's a good company I'm with. And he was pretty good about it. But I didn't know how bad he was because he actually died, I think, about a year after that. I found out later he died. And he was a young man, by that time, he was probably in his mid 40s. And he was very wealthy. But his person changed. And I guess what I'm saying is that whole thing, in a sense, was pretty miraculous all the way around.
And there's one important thing we want to wrap the whole thing in, and why we're doing it at this time of the year.
Right.
Guys, yeah, we want to tell Tony.
I want you to tell him, but I didn't know, because my sister here, Lisa, she knows everything about Israel and everything about the whole thing. Well, that night when he said he gave himself to Christ, I called her later. And okay, now you can tell them.
So when Tony called me that night, I was amazed at his whole story. And when he said, the boss said he wanted Jesus to come into his heart, I said, Tony, do you know that this is the first night? It's Rosh Hashanah. We were right on point, right on arrival. And I do believe it's because obviously God saw this man's heart, that he needed him and wanted him. Tony's heart was there to help and was willing to open up. And I do believe that at this time and all around the year that there are believers out there praying for moments like this to happen. And it happened. It happened to one of the toughest, roughest people you could imagine, but it happened. And then, like Tony said, the very next day, the evidence was there when the secretary calls and said, "What did you do?" The boss is seeing churches and talking about Jesus. And, you know, we're just grateful for those moments that we do open our mouths, even when we're less than perfect, even if we don't have a brochure, even if we don't have the Bible in our hand, we don't have all the tools all the time, but God will give you the testimony or whatever you need to say in that moment. And his life literally depended on it. Tony did not know that just 2 years later, this boss that we respect tonight is now looking down on us from Hashemayim, or heaven.
Well, I wanted to say one other thing interesting about her telling me about the churches and all that. That's all he was talking about. Is you got to remember, we pass some churches all the time, and he never seen them. So, you know, they, I guess they wanted to go to that, right in the Bible where they removed the scales from his eyes. That's really kind of a miracle there, that he seen all those churches. And that's all he talked about. That was just amazing. And I don't know, I think from what I know from him, he had a hard life. I could tell. And it was very hard for him to open up. And I just think that it was God's timing. I was in the right place at the right time for the right person. And, you know, I guess I'm just going to say this. For someone who's not really like good at bringing people over, you know, God used me, who's not really good at it, and got me to say the right thing at the right time, and God handled the rest. And his life changed. So anyways, that's what happened. But the whole period of time that I was with him, there's so much about him that I'm not even saying. His character, there's so many funny things that happened. Just like I said, all the events and going to these places. And I just want to say one thing that was kind of funny. When he got tossed out of one of the bars, I seen them throw him out of the bar. 2 bouncers picked him up and threw him in the air. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because they threw him pretty far and he landed on his back, but he jumped up so fast in the karate stand, I started calling him Super Boss, you know, and the bouncers were looking at him. And I just said, wow, he's definitely ready for anything. But sorry to switch the subject around, but there's just so many of those events. His personality and all the places that we went to in Tampa and all the things we did and all the traveling and all this, I mean, he was wealthy and all that was going on, and here he changed. He became simple at the end. So
we know he's got more than the wealth he ever had on this earth. He's got it all in heaven, and he did what he could with what he had. You did too. And that's the whole point. Sometimes we make things more complicated, and God's trying to simplify. Just be present, do what you can where you are, and he does the rest. And I think it's a wonderful story to share right now, because we are going into the high holy days, and there's family members, there's people, there's all kinds of people hurting out there, and they don't have to all be poor. We see people very, very wealthy hurting too. And God knows who they are, and he knows how to get us in front of the right people at the right time. So everyone, I just want to thank you for listening to us share Tony's story with his boss from Tampa. Obviously, you now know he's graduated to his home in heaven, Hashemayim. And Tony is still a very well-known artist there in Tampa. In fact, as we wind this up, I'm just going to show you that what you've been looking at is an iguana that he made that is now residing in a hotel there. And you can pick this up on YouTube if you want to know about Tony and his artwork. And yes, he does do a lot of messianic artwork as well, he's done through the years. So We just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Tony, you want to say shalom to everybody?
Shalom, and thank you for listening. And I'm just happy I did it because it really needed to be known. So yeah, help the Jewish people go home. I think it's very important and significant, and I really believe God will reward you. He has, and I'm not saying it to be rewarded, but the fact is He has did so many things for me. I know it's Him, and I think it's just because I've been helping Israel all along. So anyways, on that note, God bless you all and take care.
Hoshana Tova.